Hello and welcome. This is the Carbon Watchdog podcast. Hi, I'm Adam Hardy, and this is the Carbon Watchdog podcast. And I have got Danny Badger with me from Boston in America. Danny has, he's a fisheries scientist and educator. He's been volunteering on the governing council for an organization called NNOCCI, the Italian pasta, but actually it's so NNOCCI, NNOCCI, and he is he's got an MSc in fisheries science, BSc in fisheries science, MSc in say that again?
Natural resources.
Natural resources management.
The title was just natural resources, but in effect, it was management, assessment, all of it, the above.
Okay, good one. Well, there you go. We've already said our hellos, but anyway, hello, Danny. Hi.
Hello, hello.
Good to have you on the podcast.
Fantastic.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, and you've got a great background there. Do you want to just shift your head, lean your head slightly? That is a fantastic deep sea squid.
A nice big octopus that would be the very best wedding gift one could get, as far as I'm concerned. I think others in my family might think otherwise, but I love it.
Okay, so that's on the wall behind you. That is pretty fantastic. I love the blue and the gold of the octopus. It's pretty good.
It's striking. It's a good one.
And the people listening in won't be able to see it, but you should be able to visualize that, like dark
just
blue,
imagine,
deep sea, big
octopus just descending upon you.
So we met last week at London Green Drinks, and we were just chatting about stuff. And I found out that you are you have worked up until COVID-19 struck at the New England Aquarium in Boston. And I found out that you do know a lot about corals, which are my favorite species. Well, actually, they're a class. No, are they a family? They're
There's a lot of it.
A class of tiny animals that build these fantastic reefs, like the Great Barrier Reef and everything. And you refused to do a podcast on coral reefs. You ducked out of that one. You said you weren't in the know enough. You weren't in the know enough about corals to be able to talk about them for an hour or so. But
I could talk about them, but I can't claim to be the expert on them.
But that's okay, because there is an awful lot of stuff to talk about otherwise. And part of what's going on in the aquariums and the presumably all sorts of museums and galleries where the public go is the scientists like yourself, the educators in there who get to show people what's what, have the opportunity or maybe even the necessity to talk about climate change and how it is affecting whatever it is behind the glass or in the on the wall that you're looking at. For instance, well, if it was a coral aquarium, then there would be an absolute necessity to say, well, these ones here are living very happily in their coral aquarium in perfect conditions, but out there in the wild, it gets up to 30, 31, 32 degrees, and the heat of the ocean, of the heat of the sea, will bleach the corals. And if that happens too much, it will kill the corals, and that'll be it. And it's hard to talk about that and how threatened these things are without mentioning climate change and global warming. And there you immediately get into, well, I assume in America it's going to be pretty much the same as here. There's a large contingent of people who just don't want to know. I assume that what would happen is the adults at least would go, okay, next exhibit, and walk on, right? In that case, or they would be engaged and they would be like, that is shocking or whatever.
Right. It's all about how you frame it. It's all about how you approach the conversation. And there are times that, you're going to get somebody who is dismissive, but I have found the most valuable way to reach anybody is not to preach at them, but really to start building that rapport of, we're not just looking at these animals that are in this tank that might represent the ocean. We're showcasing how we are all connected. And one of the things I often think about when they're looking through the glass, my job might be to then show the reflection back to the human of, like, you are part of the system. And one of our challenges within aquariums and zoos and museums is bringing to life what is on exhibit. And I've often seen my career as a bridge, just to kind of bridge together the divide that we humans have created between our civilized world and the natural world. And the more we create that divide, the more imperiled we become.
Okay, so you're basically saying that I, as a visitor looking at this tank of whatever it is, that is that I'm a part of the same world that they're a part of.
Yeah.
And that sounds like something that you're gonna, okay, that sounds like something that right there, technically in the conversation, you're gonna have to introduce, you're gonna have to go, right now I'm gonna say something and gonna get a reaction. Or do you always bide your time and wait for the perfect moment when they'll say something and you'll go, yes?
No, I try to steer the conversation, and I don't try to be just reactive, but I also find that if you go into a conversation with a preordained script, there is a danger of being too married to that script and not allowing yourself to engage with the human in front of you as a human. And
Okay.
if you make yourself into this other existence of, I'm a scientist, or I'm an educator, therefore I know better than you, you're going to get nowhere. And I think that's a reality that we've seen within education, we've seen within resource management, fisheries management. I know in this country, some of our biggest failures have been when researchers or managers have come to industry, to fishers, and say, oh, I know how to do this better than you do, and I'm not going to even incorporate what your knowledge is or what your lived experience is. And when we've had our best successes has been scientists, industry, other stakeholders get together and actually work as a team towards a common value. And so that's where we really start off our conversations when we're framing, when we're using what NNOCCI focuses on, the National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation, is you start off these conversations by really diving into what is a shared value. And so there's been some research we've done on what values resonate with, admittedly, this research has been focused on the US. So what values tend to be pervasive regardless of political stripes or lived experiences, and things like the idea of responsible management is something that everyone shares. What we're responsible for might be changed based on your lived experience. But if you can focus on, we have a responsibility to manage our world, then you can start steering the conversation into a better direction.
So essentially you have a job, or rather the people out, the employees of the aquarium or the zoo or wherever, they have, their job is to go there and be accessible for the visitors.
Mm-hmm.
So the zoo or the aquarium doesn't just say, well, go out there and talk to them, ask them whether they've had a nice day. Presumably they say, well, you go out there and do what? Go out there and spread what message? What message do they want to? I mean, right. It could be just really, just make sure you get a donation for the museum, okay, or whatever it is. or actually, has it got the, when you have the opportunity, then put in like points A, B, or C, or what?
We are mission driven. So we are the New England Aquarium. Their mission, in essence, is to protect the blue planet. And so that How we engage our audience is going to depend on who our audience is. Those of us who were working with visitors, or I ran some marine science courses where I had students come to us and stay with me for a while, and be quite engaged in extensive learning. In those cases, we do have this greater ideal of, we don't want them to just enjoy their time, but we do want them to enjoy their time.
Right.
We need them to have positive associations with the ocean, but we also need them to understand that they have a responsibility, they have a role to play in the conservation and continuation of that ocean, and then being able to have that ocean as part of our working world, a resource that we're part of the food web that
you try to bring across the sense that they should feel some sense of stewardship for it.
Absolutely. Perfect. Yeah.
And how successful do you think that is on a case-by-case basis when you've got, say you go out on the floor in the aquarium and you talk to 10 people, how many of them are going to pick up a message from you that's going to, I assume with kids, you don't even have to make an effort. They'll just do it for you, right? They'll just steer the course.
Yeah, kids make things so much easier. Most adults, so the New England Aquarium was one of the top places for a first date in the city. Usually when you're on a first date,
Really?
you don't want to go into deep philosophical, well, actually some of us do, but it may not be the best conversation piece or best situation to thrust your first date into a situation where you have to talk about contentious issues. But it's hard to put a number on how many out of 10. The truth be told, most of the people, or a large percentage of people who come to cultural institutions are already in a mindset of wanting to learn something.
Okay.
And they tend to be relatively receptive. Occasionally you do find somebody who wants to just butt heads. And so there's a skill in learning when, okay, maybe I'm just going to focus on how pretty this animal is. Maybe I'm going to focus on look how much fun your kid is having. I had a really, I think one of my most telling moments. Well, some people in this field really like to find the conversations that they're going to have a lot of synergy with. So they're looking for audience members who are already on board.
Okay.
One of my angles is,
well, just for self-fulfillment for themselves, right?
Right. Because it is, working in this field is depressing. It's really hard because we see some really incredibly scary results of our species level ignorance and government level ignorance.
Right.
But when you feel like all the world's against us and we're the only ones who understand what's going on, that puts you in a bad spot, both mentally. It also puts you in a bad spot in terms of being able to build the collaboration you need to build to actually get.
Okay, so you're saying that that's, like, aside from climate change, just in terms of our human understanding of the marine ecosystem and the way it works and the way that we should manage it and steward it better, there's just a massive gulf there between the reality of what we do and what we should be doing.
There can be, absolutely. And but I also really like to stress those moments of success, those areas where we've really seen some incredible progress. And one of the things that we try to do in NNOCCI is, you start off with these values, these ideas, make sure you're kind of centering this conversation around a shared value. Right. Ultimately, you need to kind of connect the dots, show the causal chain of, well, as we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas, it contributes to this blanket around the earth, this carbon dioxide blanket that is causing some rampant growth of CO2 and rampant growth of global temperatures. And then we have to create this causal chain of how that connects all the way to this animal that we're looking at, and also to our actions impacting that animal. So you try to create this full circle effect. And there was a really incredible study in the around 2006 or so in this country where they a group called Pew looked into
Pew Research Institute, right? I think I've heard of them. Yeah.
They looked into it was dubbed the Six Americas study. They looked into where Americans lay within the realm of climate change is happening, and I know something. It's human cause, and we have to do something about it. All the way to it's not happening, or there's no way that humans could be impacting it, and screw you for even talking about it. And so they're trying to get a sense of where Americans really lay within this spectrum, and they found that we tend to fall into 6 camps running that whole gamut. Most people are in the middle, which means most people are accessible. Only 6% of Americans were in the camp of, I know it's not happening and we can't do anything about it, which means 94% of people in this country are willing to at least consider that humans have a responsibility to manage their behavior within this world because it's impacting our existence in this world and the existence of other animals throughout our ecosystems.
Yeah. Okay. It does. Yeah. Although it's been, you could say it's been a long time coming. It hasn't, in terms of cultural change, it hasn't been very long at all. That we're now at the point where it looks like, in November in the US elections, I'll find out if I'm right or not, but it looks like there is now a Democratic majority who is prepared to vote about these big issues, about climate change. And I don't think Trump is just going to lose because of climate change, but I think that will be a major contribution to it.
I hope so. I hope that really becomes the case. There's an issue of people who are environmentally minded who tend not to vote, which is one of our biggest challenges in this country. And it's one of the biggest reasons, in my opinion, why we are so lagging in our collective government level response.
Well, because of the people who don't vote.
And that's one of the big things, we in NNOCCI, we're really trying to focus on, there's individual actions you can do, obviously, but the biggest goal is creating these community level, these society level changes that have to happen, and engaging every single citizen that we can to get involved with those large scale solutions. Because without those large scale solutions, we're screwed.
So you mean that basically, when I see all of these adverts and these the slogans and the people pushing for the climate change solutions, they're always saying, make sure you vote for a party that will take climate change action. And I think, everything is so polarized that saying just go out and vote is not going to make any difference, because even if people do believe in climate change, if you're a Republican, you're still not going to vote for Biden.
No.
And so what they're aiming at is they're aiming at people who just wouldn't normally vote. I didn't realize that. I suppose that's a big issue. Although over here in the UK and in a lot of European countries, in Australia, places like that, there's still only 40 to 50% Democratic participation. It's really crap. There's so many people who just can't get out of bed in time, or I don't know what it is.
Right. It's interesting. We so I join you for the London Green Drinks. For Boston Green Drinks at the end of September, we're having someone come from the Environmental Voters Project, and their whole angle is getting people who would vote with an environmental forward mindset to vote, because so few of us do. That's their whole angle, and they're going to be sharing a little bit more about how they approach that. I'm really excited to see how that conversation plays out. But it's one spot. I also think, one of our challenges is that mindset that, well, because I'm a Republican, I can't vote for Biden, even if I agree with that we need to do something about climate change. Voting is imperative. We have to do that. We have to hold our leaders accountable. But we also need to get engaged with actions beyond just the ballot box, getting our communities to come together, because society exists between votes all the time. And we can influence the big players in our communities to an incredible degree. And even, you know, I've seen middle schoolers who have motivated.
When you say the big players, you mean who? You mean corporations, or you mean the politicians, or both?
Corporations, whole school-wide systems, anything that's really engaging a large number of people, so that if you can change that group's activity, you can have a pretty substantial impact on emissions and other environmental issues. So I'm thinking of getting involved with your community. So cities, on the city level, the town level, on the county level, the state level.
Right, cities can have. We have that in the UK with university, with City of London. Sorry, not the City of London. That's just a financial district. I mean, London and the Mayor of London. That is a pretty major force. I know London is just so big, so they can do a lot if they want to. They put them on.
Right, and I think even the smaller municipalities, if 10 small towns get together and collaborate on, hey, in our region, we're going to make this. We're all part of the same watershed. Maybe we'll say, as this part of our watershed, we're going to institute an array of policies that are climate forward, and we're going to put that as, you know, our citizens are demanding this. Our citizens are showing up for town hall meetings. They're voicing their concerns, and they're engaging with solutions. That is what's.
Sorry, what sort of concerns do you typically think they'll be talking about?
Now, some of it would be where our energy is coming from. Some of it will be, you know, cement production is one of the biggest contributors to climate change. So some of it's going to be engaging with researchers to find out how do we build with better materials, and how do we source, if we're going to build a variety of buildings as we build up our communities, do we intentionally spend an extra 5% in order to be able to source from products that will ultimately save us a lot more money, because we don't have to deal with the implications of climate change as much as we would if we don't start making these collective actions?
Right. Okay. Well, that's pretty. That's pretty good. That kind of that taps right into the same sort of theme that I'm looking at with the idea of community groups here. I originally was thinking about pushing the whole idea of reducing your carbon footprint by using carbon rationing. But the idea of carbon rationing on a voluntary basis, it really doesn't work. So, and people think that it's got much more to do with money and about people making profit and offsets and stuff like that than it actually does. So I'm thinking more, but so you get your community group and you get them to start recording their carbon footprint. And, or, you know, you can give them a ration and see how quickly see how slowly they prevent it getting down to zero. But yeah, they have a community would have a lot more say and a lot more influence when they talk to local politicians and local corporations and businesses. So yeah, that sounds like a major way forward. And with people though, on a personal level, I was thinking that you might be saying, yeah, people are now beginning to see the effects of climate change in terms of whatever it is with their local river, with local wildlife, with trees or with harvests, whatever. I don't know whether you've got that much more in Northeast USA, or not even. America is such a. America's got it really bad for climate change. I keep having to remind myself how lucky I am living in England,
Yeah.
which is really just sort of mostly rainy, bad weather and the occasional burst of sunshine. And what we call a heat wave is something that you would just go, that's a heat wave? No.
Right. Right.
But in
And
America, you've got your
yeah.
west coast is burning up, your south coast is getting blown apart by hurricanes. And you had a hurricane come up the east coast as well a couple of years back.
Yeah.
Was that Sandy, or was that the place where it landed?
Sandy, Hurricane Sandy. Yep. And it's, one of the challenges I think we have in America is that we are such a large country. We reach so many different types of ecosystems. It's really easy for somebody living where I live to not really feel the effects that somebody in the Southeast is feeling or the Southwest is feeling. We can see this stuff intellectually on the news, but until you have a lived experience, it's really hard, or until you are engaging with people who are having those lived experiences, it's really hard to put yourself in their shoes. And so one of the strengths, I think, of NNOCCI has been that it's a national network of people who are engaging with this work of climate change interpretation throughout the country. And the challenges they face are pretty diverse. And some of these institutions have a policy of, we cannot use the words climate change. We cannot directly head on voice anything about climate change because it's so politically charged. Wow. So we have to be strategic about how we have those conversations. Okay. New England Aquarium is pretty bold in that sense of being able to, they're willing to put a stake in the ground, saying we have to make a stand because this is this is the main issue of our generations, and it's so engaging with people across the country it's been really valuable to understand how better to access individuals. But I also think that there's a consistency through, no matter where you're from, of how do you engage a human is by connecting with them as a human. One of my favorite. Yep.
No, go on. Your favorite what?
Oh, one of my favorite experiences of engaging somebody who was a bit of a naysayer was actually in your neck of the woods. I was in Ireland, and I had a friend who was working at the Dingle Seal Sanctuary. And it was shortly after some seals had been decapitated and their heads had been nailed to the sign. And there was a lot of animosity against seals in the region. And I was visiting my friend, and it's a small operation, and they rescue imperiled seals and try to bring them back to health and return them to the wild.
Okay, sorry, hold on. A lot of people won't know why anybody would want to decapitate a seal. I mean, I can guess, but you're going to have to say.
Oh, yes. And well, actually that's going to get to, I'm going to get there with the response we had from somebody from the public while I was there. I was sitting with my friend at the front desk, and the sanctuary, it's both a sanctuary and public can pay money to come in and see the seals and see some rescued birds. And this family came in, and the kids were super excited, and the matriarch of the family came up, and she, in colorful language, expressed, what the heck am I going to be paying money to see here? And my friend's like, oh yeah, we rescued these seals and blah, 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 and we're gonna return them to the wild. And she's like, I don't know why I want to pay money for this. I'd rather shoot them. And then she plopped her money down because her grandkids wanted to go in, and then she went in, and my friend was not very well. She hadn't had a ton of experience in those situations, and there was only one other person working there at the time who was back with the seals, who was quite young and also inexperienced. So I was like, all right, maybe some backup would be useful. And I went back, and I just started milling around the sanctuary, and I found this woman, and I just started a conversation with her. And I asked her, hey, I got to ask, why do you want to shoot the seals? And she's like, well, I'm a fisherman, and they eat all my fish and they destroy all my shrimp pots. And that's one of the big issues for the fishing community is they see seals as competition. They see seals as destructive forces in the environment. And so the way I engaged her was kind of harking back to what I was previously saying. I tried to meet her where she was in that, recognizing she had some valid concerns. Her livelihood, she saw seals as a threat to her livelihood. And so I highlighted, you know what, the shrimp pots thing sucks. I honestly don't have an answer for that. We clearly need to work with some pot makers who can make better pots or make some sort of system that is a little bit more seal proof, because we always have to deal with those elements in nature, and that's something I can't help with. That sucks. With the fishing piece, or the fish piece of it, seals are predators, and they go for the sick and the weak. So they actually thin out the less valuable fish, make it so that the fish that you catch are more valuable, and they actually make the whole population more healthy so that you will have a livelihood tomorrow too. And I was dumbfounded that I found the words in apparently an eloquent way, enough way that she responded with, huh, crap, I guess that makes sense. And so like then we just had a little, we chit-chatted for a little while, and I was pretty struck that here was this person who came in with pretty much ready for fisticuffs, and we had a human conversation. We had a conversation that recognized that she has valid concerns, and I think that's where I really want us to focus is.
Yeah, totally. I mean, they are valid concerns.
We in the choir, we know that there's some big issues, but those who may not already be on board with environmental issues, there is a value in understanding what their true concerns are. If you can talk to them as a human, you might actually get to a better spot.
That's totally true with I mean, if I'd been there, I would have gone, yeah, you're right. Those seals, damn those seals, they're taking your fish. I would have been, because it's okay. I've never got out on a fishing boat and tried to pull in a catch of fish, but I can imagine. You watch David Attenborough and all those sea lions and stuff, and they're just chomping down on those fish. Yeah. I don't think those fish stand a chance. Are you sure about that thing with just the sick and the weak? Or is that just like, are you spinning it?
No. So think about, so seals within the natural setting. If you have a seal, if you put fish into a pen, they are already disadvantaged. But if a seal any predator goes after prey that is in full fighting shape, they could get injured. Just even if, I mean, a lot of fish have spines, even a small fish. And if you could be a pretty beefy seal, but if this fish thrashed in the wrong way and poked your eye, that eye could get infected, and that could ultimately be your demise.
Right.
I'm not suggesting that seals are thinking that through, but over time, evolution has really taught predators to go for the prey that is going to be the least likely to damage them. And
okay.
So if you put fish in a compromised position, i.e. in a net, they are already weak. They're easier prey.
I mean, so salmon fishing, not salmon fishing, I mean salmon farming, where they're all in a net. If a seal or a sea otter or something gets in there, then that's going to be carnage, right?
Yeah, pretty much. And so that's a matter of making sure, sorry, I just have to move rooms real quickly. That's a matter of ensuring, that's where best practices can make a pretty big impact. So if you can change, you have to change how often you pull in your nets. Maybe you change, is there a design that can reduce the likelihood that seals can get into a fishing pen, a fish farm pen? I always think about, there was there was an incredible example of collaboration between managers and fishermen in Canada on the West Coast years ago. They were having some pretty significant issues of seabirds, albatross, who are endangered, who, while fishermen were pulling in long lines, these long lines, they're pretty deep in the water. But as you pull them up to the boat, they ultimately get close towards the surface. And once they're within, a couple dozen feet or even more, a couple dozen meters even, seabirds will dive down, take the fish right off the hook, and some of those birds get hooked themselves and drown and die. And because they are endangered, a fishing operation could be shut down if they catch too many of them.
The albatross.
Albatross, there's a whole slew of seabirds that would get caught by this, but some of it would be albatross who were endangered and are endangered. And they came up with a solution of, fishermen suggested, what if we just strung a streamer, like a silly string, that waves over the water for 100 feet behind the boat? Will that deter them? And it was a incredibly cheap solution that reduced bycatch by 97%. And it was effective. Because they recognized they're fishermen. They're living it, and they looked around and they're like, well, the birds are only diving down when the hooks are within a certain distance behind my boat. So what if we can make a distraction that the birds don't want to fly through, that extends that far behind the boat? So I think I say that to revisit the idea that the more we can engage with people who are living these experiences, and it'd be so easy for managers to come in and say, no, you're going to have to do this our way.
Right. And
the fishermen are going to do everything they can to fight that, because when somebody comes into your home and tells you how to live, that's a hard thing for anybody to take. And I think that extends to climate change. If we need to engage the entire community with honest dialogue that can result in true solutions.
So how does NNOCCI get to the entire community? How do you get people to overcome their desire just to sit on the sofa and watch Netflix instead?
Yeah. We have the advantage that a huge number of people come to zoos and aquariums in our country and throughout the world. Kids are an amazing access point. And so it is an activity that a lot of people will come and seek us out for. And so while we have them in our audience, we can engage with them. That's not getting to everybody.
Okay.
Part of our goal, part of my goal with educational programs has always been, great, I'm teaching you, but I want you to teach others. I want you to go out and share with your friends. Are there things that we can get you so excited about that you start building a group at school who is going to work to reduce single-use plastic within your school? Like, can you get your school board on board with that? Well, that's going to require you engaging with friends and even getting different stakeholders involved. Like, maybe you have to talk to the cafeteria staff. How do you engage with them? So it can be this holistic learning experience for students. It can be a holistic experience for adults too.
And they do that, and the people who are inspired to do that are basically inspired by nature. They just want to protect whatever it is that they've been introduced to, that they realize is in danger.
It can be.
They think they can do something about that, and that is the inspiration that carries them through to actually take some action on it. Right. Bring some people together, go out and start motivating others to adopt changes that is going to have some sort of impact, right?
One thing that's really important about our approach is we stress that it needs to not be crisis framed. We don't want to sugarcoat. We have a very real concern about how we are operating as as a global community in terms of our impacts on climate change. But
right.
if you go at it and say the sky is falling, people are going to say, well, I got to find a cave to duck into. It's not going to be, well, how do I prop up that sky? And so it's...
Okay, so I use the words in danger.
Yeah.
Presumably that's what you picked up on.
A little bit, yeah.
So what else do you say? I mean, you want to protect it? So they
Yeah,
want to protect it. It's protection. Okay.
Yeah, protection is one of those values that is actually, it permeates all walks of life, at least in the US, and our indications are that that value extends throughout much of the world. We haven't done studies in every country, but there's a lot of indication that the idea of protection, again, what you are protecting is, you know, not everybody's going to care about that coral, but you're going to care about your family. You're going to protect your family. You're going to protect your community. You're going to protect your country. That can be really motivating. And so I like to see this all as, these are opportunities to engage with really cool new ways to interact with our world, and potentially amazing business opportunities. And I think as you frame it as, this is an opportunity, this is something I'm excited for, rather than, oh God, we just gotta dodge this bullet. How do we dodge this bullet? That playing defense is not fun.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can see that, definitely. The name
NNOCCI
is the National Network for Climate Change. And what was the I?
Oh, it's National Network for Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation.
Interpretation. Yeah. Right. Okay.
So we're trying to interpret. It is a. We are recognizing that while we live and breathe science and education and environmental issues, that is not forefront of every human's mind. And so our job in an aquarium is, we are interpreting what it is you're seeing. You're seeing this beautiful coral reef. Oh, we're going to convey to you the community that is within that coral reef. We're going to convey to you the challenges it faces, the different components of it that it faces, and also the challenges we face as a presenter of this ecosystem. We try not to dance around the issue that there is a discomfort for a lot of people of having animals in an artificial environment. And there's a pretty robust conversation of whether that's a valuable thing. But I will say that you can, if you interpret it right, if you treat these animals well and show that we're being responsible for them, and this is just a microcosm of how we can be responsible for our entire world. It creates that causal chain, or that helps create the causal chain to understand how we can be helpful to the world at large.
Right. I think I think coral, I don't think anybody could object to having coral in an aquarium, because coral, they're just like microscopic. Well, no, they're not quite microscopic. They're tiny, teeny tiny little polyps.
Again,
but I presume you're talking about seals and otters and fish. Big fish.
Yeah, that's usually where the conversation kind of gets sticky.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some people who would advocate for even invertebrates who are often not the center of concern for a lot of animal rights groups.
Sure.
They deserve to be cared for and treated with respect. And I think, yeah, most of the concern is around charismatic megafauna, seals, dolphins, things like that. And what we really stress is that it is about being responsible about how we care for these animals. If we should not be having certain species in a small tank. There's other species that actually do better in a small tank because they naturally live in caves and really don't move more than a couple meters in a lifetime after they've found a home.
Right.
So that's an incredible opportunity for a conversation to understand there's a lot of weird nuance throughout the world. Let's interpret that nuance.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I can see that the megafauna, there's two conversations there, aren't there? You've got these things like turtles, and I assume that you can have kids looking at all sorts of different animals, but as soon as you get the big ones like the dolphins and so on, then even the little kids will start going, well, it's not right that they should live in a little tank.
Right.
But
I love that conversation with kids, because even if it puts me in a hot seat, it's a real conversation, and it's something that needs to be discussed. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Right. So, okay. At the New England Aquarium where you work, so what was the largest animal that they had there?
Largest animal was Myrtle the sea turtle. She's a green sea turtle. She was actually rescued years and years and years and years ago, and has been in aquariums she was there since we started in 1969.
Wow, okay.
Real quickly.
You got a visitor.
It's time for my baby's snack, so he's a little chatty.
So what I'm saying is you didn't have dolphins there, or
we used to have dolphins, and there was a recognition in the 90s that the setup we had for them was not quite appropriate, and so we made a conscious decision to I say I was not there at the time, but I applaud their approach of, we wanted to make sure that what we have is we're being responsible about it. We also have fur seals and harbor seals and sea lions, and one of the best measures for is this animal who is in an aquarium or in a zoo, are they being cared for well? Is their lifespan similar to what it would be in the wild? Because stress kills. If an animal is stressed out, they do not survive as long. Okay. And so we've been pretty happy that our average lifespan for these large mammals has been longer than it would be in the wild. And that's a really strong indicator that they're being well cared for. They're healthy. They're healthy weights. They're not stressed, and that's key. But they also create this amazing opportunity to form that love of the ocean. You watch a sea lion for a little while, and it's hard not to just kind of have your heart melt just a little bit even.
They're big as well. They had one in a wildlife park outside London. I didn't realize how big they were.
Yeah, some species can get huge. We don't have the super big ones, but we have they're pretty decent size. There might actually be one or two who might be bigger than Merle right now.
Well, it's bigger than a big dog. I was walking along, and there was a big sort of shoulder level wall between me and the aquarium. Yeah. And the sea lion shot out of the water and landed on the little patch of concrete on the other side of the wall. It was a glass wall, and it was like big. It was like bigger than me. It definitely weighed more than me, a lot more than me.
Oh yeah, They wasn't
quite as tall.
They can get hundreds of kilos.
I was slightly shocked.
I like to think that they do that on purpose. Sometimes I do find that the animals engage with humans, and I argue that is a strong sign that if they're engaging with people walking by and they're doing so in a relaxed way, that is a sign that they are not stressed and they're not scared. And that's a positive thing.
It's these big animals, and the stories, conservation stories, success stories about these big animals, and whales as well in particular, that I was thinking of. that really inspire me to be a bit more positive when I'm reading all of the dire headlines about global warming and climate change. I think there's still reason for being positive about it and thinking that humanity is going to pull the cat out of the bag, as it were, pull the rabbit out of the hat, because look at tigers. The tiger numbers have increased. Look at this threatened population of, I think it's right whales in the St. Lawrence Gulf, or is it St. Lawrence Gulf, or basically the between the USA and Canada there on the East Coast.
Right.
I saw a documentary about the population of whales there, and they were just they had a history of essentially roadkill from too many of them were just falling victim to big vessels going past and ramming them just without even realizing.
And that's one of the challenges that actually brings us back to climate change. The New England Aquarium has been one of the foremost research organizations that have been studying the North Atlantic right whale population for decades. And there were a lot of issues with ship strikes.
Ship strikes, that's the word.
Yeah. So big tankers that, right whales are called right whales because they're the right whale to hunt. They hang out at the top of the ocean. They just sit there. They don't move around very quickly. And when they die, they float. And so it was really easy for whalers to get to them. So they're hanging out at the top of the ocean. And you would think if a big ship is coming at you, you're going to hear it and you're going to move aside.
Yeah.
But if you're on a big ship, the quietest spot in the ocean around you is actually in front of the boat, because the prop is making all the sound, and the prop is directly behind the boat. So the whole of the ship creates this dead zone of sound directly in front.
Right.
The ship hits it, and then the whale just hangs out there, and then the ship hits it, and that's not good.
So what did they do?
They did actually through it was a super simple solution, at least for the time being. They did an analysis of where the right whales were spending their time and where the shipping lanes were, and they found that if you just moved the shipping lanes over by a few nautical miles, you could reduce ship strikes by somewhere in the order of 80 to 90%. And the way that we went about getting that change done, it got industry on board. It only increased the transit time for the ships by a nominal amount, so it was not a significant issue for them. And the shipping lanes got moved, and ship strikes went down tremendously. However, there's other issues that they run into. They get caught up in lobster pot line.
Yeah, that was the one that I was thinking of, David. They've
Yeah,
been busy inventing new types of lobster.
And that's expensive, and that's hard to figure out. But we're working. That's something that's going to take a lot of innovation. But then you bring in climate change. That we recently started having a hard time finding our population of right whales, which are the most critically endangered species of right whale, at least population of right whale. And there's only, I forget the exact number, but I think it's under 400 individuals now. And we weren't finding them in their traditional summer grounds, and they have now moved further north, presumably in response to the warming of the Gulf of Maine. It's one of the fastest warming bodies of water in the world.
Oh, right.
And so they've moved further up into Canada. And so then there was an uptick of ship strikes because those changes of shipping lanes had not been able to account for this change of where the right whales spend their time.
Right.
And so there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. And then, that's where innovation can come in.
Yeah.
Innovation is huge. Awareness is huge. If you forget about these animals, it's really hard to do anything about it. But I also they can be a poster child for the impacts of climate change that might impact all of us in ways that we don't really recognize, and trying to make sure that while we're talking about these really pretty animals or really amazing animals, we can tie that back into how is that impacting humans. And as we think about, okay, that Gulf of Maine is warming really, really quickly. Oh, right, the Gulf of Maine is one of the most productive areas in US waters for in terms of what we can take out of the ocean for our own consumption. That's going to have a massive impact on our local economy and global economy.
What's the city in Maine? Is that where Boston sits?
No, Boston is in Massachusetts. Portland is the largest city in Maine.
Okay.
Maine is a relatively rural state, so there's Portland is not a huge city. It's actually quite a lovely city. I love it. But
I've heard of it. Yeah.
And so there are really great opportunities to use these beautiful animals to inspire people, but I also don't. I think there's sometimes we focus on these charismatic animals at our own peril. I actually found some great traction when talking to visitors to the aquarium when talking about our jellyfish. Jellies are a very simplistic animal, and they are not, I mean, they're not threatened. They're
doing really well, right?
They're doing really well. They do well with warming waters. They do well in low oxygen situations. So as are you familiar with dead zones?
Yeah, Mississippi Delta, right?
Yeah, so that's a big issue with eutrophication, with too much runoff that fertilizes the ocean, makes phytoplankton build up. Zooplankton eats that real fast, and then they die faster than they can be eaten by their predators. And then they've sucked up all the oxygen, sucked down and sink down after they die, and all of the area has no more oxygen. So jellies move in because they can survive in low oxygen situations. Right. But there's a jelly that called the upside down jelly, or Cassiopeia is their genus name, I believe. I hope I don't get quoted on that one. And I should know that one. But they are a jelly that actually has zooxanthellate algae that lives inside, which is the algae that lives inside of coral that gives coral its color. So coral is an animal that hard coral forms that shell and lives inside the shell, but inside their body they have this algae that photosynthesizes the light from the sun and turns that into energy that the jelly, or then that the coral then gets to consume and gets a lot of their sustenance that way.
Oh, right. So this is an animal that's got plants living inside it that can absorb sunlight to make energy, and then the plants share that with the animal.
Right. Okay. Right. So they have a garden inside them, and so Cassiopeia, the upside down jelly, does that just as coral does that. But yet these jellies their systems can be more susceptible to minute changes in the setup, in temperature, in pH. One of the big issues of climate change is ocean acidification, and we're seeing our ocean become more and more acidic, and that's
you corrected my article there. I went and put something in there about that.
Perfect. And that stress can result in the
so you've got animal life there too, huh? I don't worry about it. It's all right. You don't have
the wild animal that
is that someone at the door? Okay. It's normally a sign there's someone at the door.
Oh no, in this case it's a sign that his arch nemesis, who lives across the street, is out for a walk.
Okay, good one. So basically, going back to these upside down jellyfish that have got plants photosynthesizing inside them, correct me if my A-level biology is wrong, but that means that the plants are absorbing CO2 to photosynthesize, and that's how they can survive in this dead zone?
No, not necessarily. The
Oh,
most
okay.
jellies don't have zooxanthellae algae, and most jellies are more resilient to changes in acidity than fish are, or than some mollusks, some things with shells. Um,
They're more or less susceptible to it?
They're less susceptible, and
Right, right.
they're
Okay, that makes sense.
particularly
Yeah,
less susceptible to dead zones, so they can
right.
deal with low oxygen situations. When you introduce the garden inside of a jelly,
Yeah,
as any gardener can tell you, as you change pH or any number of nutrients can make it so that your potatoes don't grow, or whatever doesn't grow the way it ought to, or it could. And so if you change,
I know that.
when you introduce a variety of life forms in a system, I think you also introduce an opportunity for more things to go wrong. And so while the jelly itself might be okay with low oxygen,
Yeah.
They actually are, in many ways, the Cassiopeia do well because the algae produces oxygen, and they can use that. But the algae may be, and I don't know all of the details for the algae that lives within Cassiopeia, but the algae could be more affected by changes in the environment. And what I do know is that coral has similar algae inside them, and when things get acidic, they spit that coral out, or when things get, I mean, they spit that algae out. When things get too warm, they say, oh, the world is ending. I'm gonna not focus on having housing a good situation for this algae. I'm going to focus on myself for the moment.
Okay.
And it can be a defense mechanism for the short term, but if conditions continue, they don't have the algae repopulate.
Yeah, yeah. I've always read those stories about how all these articles about the corals bleaching must be the same with the jellyfish, and I'm like, why do they lose their algae? Don't let them go, for God's sake. It's really easy.
Right. And I'm not saying that the jellies necessarily lose their algae. I actually don't know how much they shoot them out if they don't do well with that, but I use the tanks with those jellies in it to indicate how complex these systems can be and how sensitive they can be to changes. And then I can translate that over to coral. When we have coral in an exhibit, that's an even easier discussion.
The jellyfish exhibits that I've seen have always been really quite simple, but they're much, much more interesting. I find them much, much more interesting, not intellectually, but just like in a kind of way that makes me stand and stare.
Yes.
I find them, I don't know why, I find them just hypnotizing almost.
You'll find them a lot in restaurants and casinos because they really, they hypnotize you and make you spend more money. They are,
I've never realized
there's such a simplicity to them. I was actually, one of my first gigs at the New England Aquarium was, I like to call it, as a jelly wet nurse. I raised baby jellies. And and they're really hard to raise from polyps. They're very susceptible to a variety of things. And so the New England Aquarium is one of the places that has figured out how to do it the best. But it is complex, and there's a lot of opportunities for it to go wrong. But when you have an exhibit with them in it, it's so beautiful.
Yeah. Maybe that's why you get all these people going on their first date there.
That's a big part of it.
Come and watch the jellyfish.
The other part is
what I'm doing.
We actually have our harbor seals are on display outside of our paywall. So you can see the harbor seals before you ever pay for the aquarium.
Right.
Which means it is a common place for people to go after they've had dinner. Even if the aquarium is closed, they can go and take a look at the harbor seals. And
Oh, okay.
and sometimes I've had people tell me, I've had one person in particular tell me, yeah, it's such a great move. You take a lady over to the harbor seals and you just watch them. You can put your arm around her and she's just like, oh, they're so beautiful, and just it just makes sure the conversation just stays in a good spot.
Fantastic. Okay, good one. Look, it's coming up to the hour almost since I hit the record button. So shall we start to wrap it up? I think you've hit most of the main points there that I wanted to cover, definitely. I've now worked out how to say NNOCCI. So it's the National Network of Ocean and Climate Change Interpretation.
Yes. Yes.
Fantastic.
And one of the key parts of there is NNOCCI really does a lot of work on the ocean. The ocean is the heart of our climate. It moves energy around our planet, just like our heart moves our blood, our bodies. But we have to work really hard on how do you connect people in the middle of a country who don't have direct access to the ocean. How do you connect them in a way that is meaningful to the health of the ocean? And the issue with climate change is it's impacting the ocean so tremendously, and by impacting the ocean, it impacts us.
It is, yeah. It's there's that little thing that's been doing the rounds on social media is that the oceans have been taking up so much of the energy that's been trapped by the greenhouse gases. It's equivalent to 5 Hiroshima atom bombs being dropped in the oceans every second.
Yes.
It's just a phenomenal figure. It just does not just how do you reckon that? It's just incredible.
Right. And that's going to be it's a reckoning we're running into.
Yeah. But I mean, thank God for that though. Otherwise we'd have toasted the planet 2 decades ago if it hadn't been for the oceans.
Oh yeah. And so without that, the ocean is an incredible buffer. The concern though is also it's holding all this heat, this energy inside it that I kind of think of it a little bit like a lobster in a boiling pot or a slowly boiling pot. The lobster doesn't notice it. If you throw a crab or a lobster in a pot of water and then make it boil, it gets hotter and hotter, and they don't necessarily notice that it's getting too hot. Is one story, and I'm not saying you should do that, but
no.
rather not cool.
That's your non-vegan story.
Truth. But I worry that the buffer that the ocean provides also allows us to be a little bit ignorant of the severity of the challenge we're facing.
Oh yeah, sure. It's massive complacency.
Right. And we need to be very conscious of the impacts of all that energy going into the ocean. How does that play out? Yeah. It plays out in changing ocean circulation, which change and ocean heat, which impacts all those storms and the frequency and potential severity of those storms, as you mentioned. Where our weather goes, things. It's really not just global warming; it's global weirding. Things are getting weirded out all over the place, and so we're not being able to be consistent. We're not being able to be.
I know what you mean. It's the oceans are just. The oceans are for me just something fantastic, and so I've been to the sea and everything. But my kids who are 10 and 8, they get to go to the sea during the summer or maybe at weekends, and they certainly don't see very much of it in comparison with what I'd like. And so how do you engage them? I recently bought a big screen TV so that we can play all these David Attenborough documentaries, the Blue Planet and so on. And so you have a big screen with rolling waves and a loud sound, and that is such an immersive experience. It's almost as good as actually going there. Well, okay.
And then you go out to just the nearby forest and challenge them to find something that can connect the ocean to that forest. So what they saw with David Attenborough, how does that connect to the forest? And that can be a tall order, but through that challenge, you end up figuring out how it is all connected.
Wow.
one of the things I always harp on is salmon in the Pacific Northwest out near Seattle area.
Okay.
There's like
okay, that's an easy one.
Yeah.
But what age kids were you talking about then? Are you talking about teenagers? Or are you talking about junior school?
I've had 6-year-olds who can I can take them out to the forest and we start looking at things that are wet. Where's that wet coming from?
Ah, right. Yeah.
And so that, you can if you work hard enough, you can figure out how it is all connected.
Right.
And and I like to focus on this plant is accustomed to a certain way of life, and if I had just mentioned a couple seconds ago that we can't predict what's going to happen. Yes, we are able to understand a lot of what's going to happen, but there's, as anybody in business can tell you, having some reliability in a system makes making decisions a whole lot easier, and that's very true in biology as well. Right. And so if this plant relies on our climate to be a certain way, if we change things, if the ocean doesn't bring as much water as this plant is used to, or if evaporation from the ocean is happening too much and it's bringing way too much, or it's going to change the temperature regime, this plant may not be able to stick around. And that deer over there that eats this plant may not stick around.
It's all interdependent.
It is.
Well, that's a pretty big word for an 8-year-old.
It is, but so it's connected. It's all connected.
Yeah.
And I mean, and you can even bring it to home. Like, if we, I don't know, you don't flush the toilet, it stinks up the whole house.
That's definitely an easy connection to make.
I just came up with that, so I don't know if that's going to hold up.
Are you on nappy duty this afternoon with your 1-year-old? Are you? That's where that thought.
Yeah, I am.
Good one. Yeah. Okay, Danny. Look, thank you very much for being my guest today.
My pleasure.
Let's wrap it up there, and it's all been fascinating stuff. So I hope that everybody who's listening will tune into the next one.
Absolutely. And I want to do a quick plug for anybody who wants to join in on these sustainability conversations, either with London Green Drinks or Boston Green Drinks, or Green Drinks is an international group that meets, and it's just people who care about sustainability ideas and has great conversations, and they are everywhere. So you can probably find one in your town, but a lot of them are, or you can start one yourself.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
A lot of them,
just put London Green Drinks into your search engine and it will come up with, it will actually come up with 2. So you've got to be careful to choose the right one. There's a Canadian London and a UK London Green Drink.
Oh, interesting. And there's also a lot of us are going online now, so you can access it from anywhere. So that's something I think encouraging these conversations, encouraging the sharing of ideas. Let's keep it going.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you very much. And have a great day.
You too.
Have a great day, everybody listening. So, bye.
Take care.
My name is Adam Hardy, and this is the Carbon Watchdog podcast. All of the website content and the podcasts are free. If you like what Carbon Watchdog is doing, then please head over to patreon.com using the link on the website and support me there. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you'll tune into the next one. Bye.